Seems to be a bit of a squeeze in here, so frankly we had been banking on some of you saying no, but thanks for coming anyway. Gemma's grandmother, Beatrice, lived here in Powerstock for many years, and it is Beatrice to whom Gemma is most often compared. Beatrice thrived in adversity, and she once told Gemma that the war was the best time of her life. Gemma has this same spirit. When I first met Gemma, she had recently overcome pneumonia, which she seemed to regard as a genuinely amusing experience. She rightly believes that a humorous attitude can make any situation easier to deal with. When she was 15, she had her first migraine while staying overnight in a friend's house in London. She was staying in a 4-poster bed at the time, and rather than getting upset or angry, she thought, at least if I'm going to die, I'm going to die in style. She recently worked with a doctor who, while giving a patient an epidural, would always say before inserting the instrument, "Let the battle commence." I think that Gemma will be this sort of doctor. And when her humour is not dark and cynical, she often tends towards the Spoonerism. Earlier in the year, we went to a talk by the Chief Inspector of Prisons, Anne Owers, who became transformed in Gemma's bizarre mind into Anne Summers. And on a hot day 2 months ago, she said to me, "You'll have to show off your rippling muscles and look like that Baywatch man, David Dusseldorf." And thirdly, there is Gemma's famous bluntness, which we've all suffered from. Shortly after we met, I helped her move some furniture into a removal van. She said to me later, "You look rather hot helping on Sunday. Is this the first exercise you've ever done?" Her bluntness occasionally sounds like a compliment, but not for long. One day she told me, "I've never met anyone quite like you before." I don't mean that as a compliment. So with that in mind, I'd like to propose my first toast to unlimited comedy. Gemma's also rather old-fashioned, as I'm sure you know. I think her one regret in life is that she wasn't born 100 years earlier. When she was 4, she was asked what her favourite subject was. She replied simply, "The olden days." Her favourite cartoon character was Babar, an elephant who enjoyed Edwardian picnics. One year her grandmother asked her what she would like for Christmas that year, and she said she'd like a pocket watch. And when her eyesight deteriorated in one eye when she was 16, she asked the optician if she could get a monocle. John Newton fortunately refused. And during a game of charades, she was asked to act out the Chippendales. Gemma was the only person in the room who hadn't heard of the male strippers of that name, but gamely attempted to impersonate some antique furniture. Gemma loves the outdoors. She loves being surrounded by animals and green fields and everything we have here today. She's devoted to her horse Balin, who I'd like to thank for making the trip here today. Apartment home in Stockbridge. She was equally devoted to her former horse, Amelia, who sadly couldn't be here today after being struck by lightning and stole off to a nearby French restaurant. Paradoxically, Gemma can be rather unsentimental about animals. She once talked to a 13-year-old girl whose pet rabbit had just escaped. She tactfully came up with a comment, "We used to have rabbits too, but they died, so we made them into rabbit stew." She likes farmyard animals very much, but not enough not to eat them. It is strangely appropriate, therefore, that in the midst of all this wildlife and countryside, this evening has, like a clay pigeon, been targeted by the barrel of a 6-month shotgun. I would therefore like to propose my second toast to Gordon Comstock. Gordon Comstock. Einstein. And Gemma is very much a practical woman, rather than a studious one, which sounds odd considering her apparent inability to ever leave university. Her brother Simon once told me she'd never read any books before she met you, and now she's read 2. Albert Einstein once apparently said if he had his life over again, he'd become a plumber. I'm sure that Gemma, by all accounts a superior mathematician to Albert, will one day feel the same. And anyone who's ever been driven in a car by Gemma will know her enthusiasm for the road. She nicknames her Land Rover Landy, and makes a noise like an accelerating Formula 1 car while driving it on roundabouts. She greatly enjoys helping her parents move house because she got to drive a van and boss people around. And when we went go-karting in Pembrokeshire, she found it rather difficult because the go-karts didn't have power steering. This interest in machines goes back a long time. As a girl, she went to the bike shop and Euphan said, you can have this sort of bike pointing to a pink one, or one of these pointing to a boy's BMX. She had without any hesitation to pick the BMX. And as a result of lots of manual labour, she's also physically very strong. Aged 8, 2 boys were trying to pull down girls' skirts in the playground. They foolishly tried to pick on Gemma. She grabbed them by the ankles and turned them both upside down. That afternoon it turned out the mother of one of them was parked on the road next to Euphan. One of the boys said simply as he passed Gemma, I won't be picking on you again. I am therefore very grateful to John and Euphan for their efforts in forming such an unusual personality. Euphan is a highly organised person and is most talented at ensuring that no domestic detail is forgotten. I won't forget how on the morning of New Year's Eve last year, we all came downstairs to see on television that Saddam Hussein had been executed during the night. This was mixed news indeed. Justice of a sort for all the victims of his brutal regime, but a sharp reminder that even in the democratic West, we still need a certain level of Old Testament revenge. 5 seconds later, Euphan opened the fridge door and said, is this all the orange juice we've got left? It is this attention to detail that we all In my dad's wedding speech 35 years ago, he said before marrying my mother, he wanted to see if his mother-in-law, Sheila, would be up to the job. Whenever he visited their house, he spent the time reading the newspaper during the washing up, crashing into furniture on return from a party at 2 a.m, and when asked whether he would like scrambled eggs for breakfast, he asked for 9. I'm glad to say I have followed this precise strategy, and Euphan has been largely tolerant of my behaviour, so I'm pleased to say that she too is now a fully improved 5-star mother-in-law. I first met John when, after going out with Gemma one evening in Winchester, I accidentally on purpose missed the last train back to London. Gemma was forced to leave her car in the town centre because she'd had a bottle of wine. We then walked back to her parents' house in Winchester. John berated Gemma for leaving her car in town overnight, pointing out the very high crime rates in south-central Winchester. He then asked me where I lived, and I said Brixton. And we heard no more about crime rates. Since that day, John has broadened my knowledge in an extraordinary number of ways. To think that, before I met him, I didn't know the exact founding date of every college in Cambridge. He's done great work in attempting to correct that glaring ignorance. In many ways, this is a very traditional wedding, and it seemed appropriate, therefore, to hold the stag night yesterday. I'm grateful to all the participants who attended, and to the good people of Bridport for putting up with us, in particular to my best man, Ralph. In addition to being a chemistry teacher, Ralph is also in charge of a company called Irritation, Embarrassment and Inconvenience. So if there's anyone who'd like to play a practical joke on, he is the man that you can help. When I told him in March that I was getting married, he said, I think the traditional response is to say, well done. He was partly responsible for it all beginning 5 years ago last week. It was Ralph who gave Gemma my phone number the day after the Worcester Ball, with the helpful advice to her, he's a bit scruffy, but he's a good bloke. Gemma once said that at weddings there should be computer projections on the walls behind the happy couple of what each will look like in 50 years' time. So when they say in sickness and in health, they will really see what it means. We've not done that. But as Iris Murdoch once said, writing is like getting married. One should never commit oneself until one is amazed at one's luck. Well, I for one certainly feel amazed at my luck, and Gemma has frequently told me that she is amazed at my luck as well. By coincidence, tomorrow would have been the birthday of Gemma's grandmother Beatrice, as it would also have been the birthday of my grandfather Tom. Tom was a doctor, as Gemma will one day be, and he used to advise people who worried all the time, nothing matters that much, and most things don't matter at all. If anything sums up Gemma's and my attitude to life, it is that statement. I would like to propose a third and final toast to Mrs. Wise.